The battle cruiser Stellar Guardian trembled as enemy fire slammed against its shields. Bright red warning lights flashed across the command bridge. Commander Tog gripped the railing tightly, his face showing no fear despite the danger. His uniform, once crisp and neat, now hung loosely on his frame after years of war. "Status report," Todd called out, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Lieutenant Kim's fingers moved quickly across her control panel. She brushed a strand of hair from her face, revealing dark circles under her eyes, a common sight among the crew. "Shields at 42%, Commander," she reported. "Tervari forces are regrouping for another attack. We've lost contact with Beta Squadron." Ty nodded, processing the information without showing emotion. This was just another day in a war that had lasted for over a century. The Galactic Confederacy and the Tervari Empire had been locked in conflict for so long that few remembered how it began. Planets had been destroyed, species had gone extinct, and still neither side gained a clear advantage. "Prepare to return fire when they approach. Standard evasive pattern Delta," Ty ordered. The tactical officer, a young man named Sung, looked up. "Sir, we've used that pattern in the last 3 engagements. The Tervari might anticipate. It's what the battle manual prescribes," Officer Sung. Todd cut him off. "We follow protocol." The bridge fell silent except for the beeping of machines and the occasional order. Everyone knew what would happen next. They would exchange fire with the Tervari ships. Both sides would take damage, and eventually, one side would retreat to repair, only to return and begin again. The same dance had been repeating for decades. Hours later, after the Tervari forces had indeed retreated as expected, Ty sat in his quarters reviewing casualty reports. 27 crew members lost today. 27 letters he would need to write to families. His door chimed. "Enter," he called. Ambassador June walked in, her diplomatic uniform contrasting sharply with the military attire throughout the ship. Her presence on a battleship was unusual. Diplomats typically stayed far from combat zones. "Commander," she greeted him with a small bow. "I apologize for the intrusion." Ty gestured to the chair across from him. "What brings a diplomat to the front lines, Ambassador?" June sat down carefully, placing a small data device on the table between them. "The Council has sent me with information that could change the course of this war." Ty raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had heard promises of war-ending developments many times before. "Our deep space exploration vessels have made contact with a previously unknown species," Jum continued. Activating the device, a holographic image appeared, a blue and green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. "They call themselves humans. Their planet is called Earth." Ty studied the hologram. "They look fragile." The image showed bipedal beings, not unlike many species in the Confederacy, but with no obvious physical advantages. "Perhaps," Jim agreed. "But their development is remarkable. They advanced from primitive flight to space exploration in less than a century. Their approach to problems is different." "Different how?" Ty asked. "They adapt quickly. When faced with limitations, they find unusual solutions." June leaned forward. "The Council believes they might see something in this conflict that we've missed. A fresh perspective." Ty laughed bitterly. What could an isolated species possibly offer against the Tervari war machine? "Our best strategists have been working on this problem for generations." "That's precisely the point," Jun replied. "Our thinking has become circular. We fight the way we've always fought because it's all we know." She gestured toward the window, where distant explosions marked another skirmish. "Can we really afford to continue this way? The analysts predict another 50 years of conflict at minimum." Tay fell silent, considering her words. Another 50 years of death reports. Another 50 years of the same battles fought over and over. "What does the Council propose?" he finally asked. "I'm leading a diplomatic mission to Earth. We will explain our situation and request their assistance." Shun hesitated. The Council wants you to join me. Me? I'm a military commander, not a diplomat. Exactly. These humans will need to understand the reality of what they're facing. You've been fighting longer than most. June stood up. The mission leaves tomorrow. Consider it, Commander. What do we have to lose? Tad looked down at the casualty list still displayed on his screen. 27 names today. How many tomorrow? I'll be ready at first light, he said quietly. As Ambassador June left, Ty turned to look out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a planet of beings who had never known this endless war. Perhaps they would see something everyone else had missed, or perhaps they would simply become the newest casualties in a conflict that seemed destined to outlive them all. The diplomatic vessel Peaceful Envoy entered Earth's orbit quietly. Ambassador June stood on the observation deck, watching the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewport. Earth looked small compared to the major worlds of the Confederacy, isolated and vulnerable among the stars. "We've been detected," reported the pilot. "Their primitive tracking systems have locked onto us. They're sending radio messages. Respond with the greeting sequence," June instructed. She smoothed her formal attire, a deep blue robe that symbolized peace in most Confederacy cultures. Beside her, Commander Ta looked uncomfortable in his ceremonial uniform. "Are you certain this is wise?" Tai asked quietly. "These humans have never encountered alien life. The shock alone could cause panic. The Council believes their isolation may be their greatest strength," Jun replied. "They haven't been tainted by a century of failed strategies. Their ship descended through Earth's atmosphere under escort from primitive jet aircraft. The humans had chosen a neutral meeting ground, a large conference center in a city called Geneva. As the ship landed, Jun could see crowds of humans behind barriers, their faces showing a mix of fear, wonder, and curiosity. "Remember," Jun told the delegation, "we are guests here. We come seeking help, not to command." The first meeting was tense. Earth's leaders sat across a long table, faces pale, as they confronted the reality of alien life. Director Park, a steady-eyed woman chosen to speak for Earth, listened as June explained the situation in the galaxy. When June finished describing the century-long war, Park leaned forward with an expression June couldn't quite read. "You mean to tell me," Park said slowly, "that we've been fighting our wars alone all this time when there's an entire galaxy at war? And now you want our help?" June nodded. "We believe fresh perspectives might." "Why us?" interrupted a man introduced as General Choi. "We must seem primitive to you. Our technology is centuries behind yours." Ta stepped forward. "Sometimes the oldest soldier can learn from the newest recruit. Your people think differently. You aren't bound by our traditions of warfare." The humans asked for time to discuss. June expected weeks of deliberation, perhaps months of diplomatic exchanges before any decision. Instead, just 3 days later, Earth's nations had reached a consensus. The Peaceful Envoy was invited to return to Geneva, where Director Park introduced Major Han, a calm-faced woman with short hair and alert eyes. "Major Han will lead our military response team," Park explained. "She's our foremost tactical expert." Han bowed slightly to the alien visitors. "I studied the information you shared about your conflict. I have questions." For the next 6 hours, Han asked about Tervari battle formations, technology, communication systems, and cultural values. Her questions were strange, not what any Confederacy strategist would ask. She wanted to know about Tervari art, their children's education, even their food preferences. What relevance does Tervari cuisine have to warfare? Ta finally asked, his patience wearing thin. Han looked at him directly. "Everything tells you something about how a people think, how they solve problems, how they might react to the unexpected." That evening, the first strategic meeting took place. Earth's team had prepared a preliminary analysis that shocked the Confederacy representatives. "Your conflict has lasted a century," Han stated, standing before a display showing battle statistics. "We believe we can help end it in months." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the alien delegation. June noticed how the other officials exchanged skeptical glances. "Impossible," said Admiral Doe, the oldest military leader present. "We've employed our best strategic minds." "Respectfully," Han interrupted, "that's the problem. You've been fighting this war so long you can't see it clearly anymore." She pointed to a star map. "Your battle patterns have become predictable. Both sides are locked in a cycle neither can break." As Han outlined her initial thoughts, Jun watched with growing fascination. The human didn't think like any military strategist she'd ever met. Han spoke of psychological warfare, of unpredictable attack vectors, of targeting systems no one had considered important. Later, when the meeting ended, Jun pulled Tai aside. "Did you notice?" she asked quietly. "Notice what?" Ta seemed irritated, his pride wounded by Han's dismissal of a century of Confederacy military doctrine. "These humans don't think like us. They don't respect boundaries between disciplines." Major Han applied economic theory to battlefield logistics. She used psychological principles to analyze tertiary defense patterns. Tay's expression slowly changed as he considered this. "They haven't specialized their thinking the way we have." "Exactly," Jun said, watching Han across the room as she spoke animatedly with her team. "To them, everything connects. It's how they see the universe." "Do you really think they can end a 100-year war in months?" Tai asked, his voice low. Jun considered the confidence in Han's eyes, the decisive way the humans had responded to an impossible situation. "I think," she said slowly, "that the Tervari have no idea what's coming." The central command room aboard the Confederacy flagship hummed with activity. Major Han stood before a large holographic display showing battle formations used in the most recent conflicts. Commander Tai and several high-ranking Confederacy officers watched as she circled areas of the display with a sweep of her hand. "Your tactics are fundamentally flawed," Han explained, her voice calm but firm. The hologram highlighted a standard Confederacy battle formation, ships arranged in a perfect geometric pattern. Commander Tai felt his face grow warm. He had used these formations throughout his career. "These are time-tested." "Time-tested failures," Han interrupted. She tapped a control, and the display showed the same formation being used in battles spanning decades. "You've been fighting the same war the same way for 100 years. And look at the results." The hologram shifted to show the current galactic map, territories gained and lost over the century of conflict, a virtual stalemate. Admiral Doe, one of the oldest military leaders present, rose from his seat. "Our ways have kept us from defeat. The Tervari have used similar tactics." "Exactly," Han said, pointing at him. "Both sides are locked in the same outdated thinking. You're so predictable to each other that neither can gain advantage." The room fell silent. Han let them absorb this uncomfortable truth before continuing. "On Earth, warfare evolved constantly. When one approach stopped working, we adapted." She displayed images from Earth's military history, ancient armies, then tanks, aircraft, naval vessels, and modern special forces. Every time technology changed, tactics changed with it. Over the following days, the human team introduced concepts that seemed chaotic to the aliens. Major Han spoke of asymmetrical warfare, using small, mobile units to attack much larger forces. Captain Jin detailed psychological operations, how to break enemy morale without firing a shot. Lieutenant Song described decentralized command structures that would allow battlefield leaders to make decisions without waiting for orders from above. "This is madness," whispered one Confederacy officer to Ta. "War requires order, structure, discipline. These humans want us to embrace chaos." Ta wasn't sure what to believe. The human ideas went against everything he had learned, yet he couldn't deny the logic behind them. Meanwhile, in the technology division, Engineer Lee worked with the Confederacy's best scientists. A small, energetic man, Lee approached alien technology with childlike curiosity, but an engineer's precision. "This plasma cannon," Lee said, examining a weapon that had been standard on Confederacy ships for 50 years. Why is it fixed in position? The alien engineer, Jai, looked confused. For stability and power. Moving parts reduce efficiency. Lee scratched his chin. But what if the target isn't directly ahead? You have to move the entire ship. That's why we have formations, Jai explained. Different ships cover different angles. Lee shook his head. Inefficient. We could mount this on a rotating platform, add targeting systems. He sketched quickly on a tablet. You would need fewer ships to cover the same firing area. Day after day, Lee and his team suggested modifications to Confederacy technology. Some ideas were rejected as impossible, but many were adopted after testing proved their worth. Your weapons are superior, Lee told his alien counterparts during one late-night session, but your imagination is limited. You stopped innovating. Jai, who had initially resisted the human ideas, now worked enthusiastically alongside Lee. It's not that we lack imagination, he said. We simply became comfortable. When both sides use the same approaches, there is no pressure to change. 3 weeks after the humans' arrival, Major Hand called a meeting to present the modified battle strategies. The room was packed with Confederacy leaders, many of whom still doubted the humans' approach. Han unveiled a battle plan unlike anything Tai had ever seen. Ships would move in seemingly random patterns. Communications would use rotating frequencies to prevent interception. Small, fast attack vessels would target Tervari supply lines, rather than engaging their warships directly. Most importantly, Han explained, we won't do the same thing twice. Each engagement will use different tactics. The Tervari won't be able to predict our movements. Commander Tai studied the plans, his expression troubled. This isn't warfare as we understand it. There's no central formation, no clear chain of attack. He looked up at Han. How can we coordinate such chaos? Precisely, Han replied with a slight smile. That's why it will work. The Tervari won't understand it either. The room erupted in debate. Some officers supported the new approach, while others insisted it was too risky. Tad remained silent, weighing the options. Finally, Admiral Do spoke. For a century, we have fought honorably and achieved nothing. Perhaps, he paused, looking around the room. Perhaps it is time to try dishonor. Han shook her head. Not dishonor, Admiral. Adaptation. Nature teaches us that those who cannot adapt perish. Tai stood. The room fell silent, awaiting his decision. As battlefield commander, his opinion carried significant weight. I have lost too many soldiers to a war that never ends, he said quietly. If there is even a small chance these tactics will work. He straightened his shoulders. I support Major Hand's plan. Han nodded, her eyes meeting Ta's with respect. We begin training tomorrow. In 1 month, we launch Operation Thunderclap. As the meeting dispersed, Tai approached Han privately. I hope you understand what you're asking of us. These tactics go against 1,000 years of military tradition. Sometimes, Han replied. Tradition is just another word for fear of change. The Imperial Command Center on Tervari Prime shook with the impact of distant explosions. Supreme Commander Bake stood before the central war table, his tall frame rigid with tension as holographic displays flickered around him. Reports flooded in from across 3 sectors, each more alarming than the last. Fortress Keth is under heavy attack, reported General Jun, his voice strained. They're using formations we've never seen before. The garrison at Valtos reports enemy ships appearing from impossible vectors, added Admiral Ho, checking his datapad in confusion. And Nexus Station has lost contact with half its defense fleet, said another officer. Bike slammed his fist on the table. This makes no sense. 3 major strongholds under simultaneous attack, and none following predictable assault patterns. His yellow eyes narrowed. What are these new Confederacy tactics? He demanded of his generals. No one had an answer. For a century, the Tervari had fought the Confederacy to a stalemate. Both sides knew the rules of engagement, the formations, the responses. War had become almost ceremonial in its predictability. Until today. In the cold void of space near Fortress Keth, Captain Min sat in the cockpit of her fighter, leading a squadron of 20 human pilots in Confederacy ships. The vessels had been modified according to Engineer Lee's specifications, faster, more maneuverable, with weapons that could fire at angles the original designers had never considered. Talon Squadron. Execute Pattern Omega, Min ordered calmly. The human pilots broke formation, each ship flying in what appeared to be random directions. The Terveri defense systems, programmed to predict standard attack vectors, failed to track the erratic movements. Their automated targeting systems locked onto empty space, while the human-piloted ships slipped through their defenses. "They're adjusting," warned one pilot as the Terveri guns began to track them manually. "Just as we expected," Min replied. "Execute Phase 2. Her squadron suddenly accelerated toward the Terveri command ship, drawing the enemy's attention and fire. Meanwhile, the main Confederacy fleet, led by Commander Tai, emerged from behind one of the system's gas giants, an approach vector the Terveri had never guarded because it required passing through lethal radiation fields. The Confederacy ships, newly shielded using Engineer Lee's designs, had survived the passage. The enemy fleet is fully engaged with the decoy squadron, Ta's tactical officer reported. Their rear defenses are minimal. Ta nodded. All ships, commence attack. The Confederacy battleships opened fire on the unprotected rear of the Terveri formation. Caught between Min's squadron and Ta's fleet, the Terveri ships broke formation for the first time in decades. Meanwhile, on the surface of Voltos, Colonel Song led a ground assault unlike anything the Terveri had ever faced. Traditional Confederacy doctrine called for large organized ground forces moving in unified formations. Song had discarded this approach entirely. "All units, disperse and engage," Song ordered. His forces, broken into small teams of 5 to 10 soldiers, scattered across the battlefield. The Terveri troops, numbering 3 times the Confederacy forces, formed defensive lines as they had been trained to do. But there was no main force to defend against. Instead, the small Confederacy teams struck from multiple directions, attacking briefly before disappearing again. "They're everywhere and nowhere," a Terveri field commander reported desperately to headquarters. "We can't establish a front line." Som watched from a mobile command post as his forces systematically targeted communications arrays, power generators, and supply depots rather than engaging the enemy directly. "Sir, the enemy is attempting to form a consolidated defense at the Central Command Building," reported Lieutenant Kang. Som nodded. "Perfect. Execute Phase 3. While the ground battle raged, the most devastating element of Operation Thunderclap was unfolding in silence. Specialist Yoon sat in a secure room aboard the Confederacy flagship, surrounded by computers modified to interface with Terveri systems. "I'm inside their network," Yoon reported, fingers flying across multiple keyboards. For weeks, she had studied Terveri communication protocols, identifying weaknesses no one had ever exploited. The Terveri had never conceived of information warfare on this scale. Their systems were protected against brute force attacks, but had no defenses against the subtle infiltration techniques Yoon employed. "Deploying the virus now," she said. Throughout Terveri space, communication systems began to fail. Defense networks displayed false information. Navigation systems directed ships into dangerous areas. The confusion spread rapidly as Yoon's programs replicated themselves across the enemy network. In his command center, Supreme Commander Baek watched in horror as one display after another went dark. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow over the faces of his officers. "Restore communications," he ordered. "Counter these attacks." "We can't, sir," his technology officer replied. "Our systems are compromised at a level we've never seen before. They're somehow inside our secure networks." Baek stared at the last functioning display, showing Confederacy forces advancing on all fronts. Their movements defied all military logic he had ever studied. How can they adapt so quickly? Bake whispered as his command center darkened around him. What has changed? The answer came 3 hours later when Beck received a transmission from Commander Ta. Behind the familiar Confederacy officer stood a woman Beck had never seen before, from a species he didn't recognize. Supreme Commander, Ta said formally, may I introduce Major Han of Earth? She wishes to discuss your surrender. Retrieved F. The Grand Hall of the Peace Station gleamed with polished stone and shimmering force fields. Supreme Commander Bake of the Tervari Empire walked slowly to the central table, his once proud posture now bent slightly. The war that had consumed a century had ended in just 6 months after humanity joined the conflict. Beck's hand trembled slightly as he pressed it against the document reader. His genetic signature transferred to the peace treaty, making official what everyone already knew, the unconditional surrender of the Tervari Empire. Across the table, Ambassador June of the Confederacy completed the same process. The treaty was now binding. Applause erupted from the gathered representatives of 100 worlds. Major Han stood to the side, watching quietly. She wore a simple Earth military uniform, rather than the elaborate ceremonial armor favored by both the Confederacy and Tervari officials. In the 6 months since Operation Thunderclap, Han had become known throughout the galaxy. Some called her the Peacemaker, others the War Ender. Han found both titles uncomfortable. Later, at the peace reception, delegates from both former enemies approached Han with questions and thanks. She answered politely but briefly, still not accustomed to the attention. They're treating you like some kind of miracle worker, said Engineer Lee, appearing at her side with a plate of exotic foods. Han shook her head. We just showed them what they couldn't see themselves. At the main conference table, Major Han took her place between the delegations. The formal discussions about rebuilding and cooperation were beginning. Ambassador June had insisted that Han lead these talks. Your conflict persisted because you both became entrenched in patterns, Han explained as the discussions opened. You fought the same way, thought the same way, for so long that you couldn't imagine alternatives. She gestured to the star map showing former battle zones. Sometimes an outside perspective is all that's needed. Supreme Commander Bake spoke up, his voice subdued. Your human tactics were dishonorable by our standards. He paused, looking around the table. But they were effective. And they spared lives on both sides. A longer war would have cost millions more. War itself is dishonorable, Han replied. The only honor is in ending it quickly. The discussions continued for hours. Trade agreements were proposed. Border planets claimed by both sides would become neutral zones. Cultural exchanges were planned to help heal the wounds of war. After the formal ceremony concluded, Commander Tai approached Han in a quiet corner of the hall. He looked different now, less rigid, the lines of stress on his face beginning to fade. In a century of war, we forgot how to think differently, Ta said. Your people reminded us of what we lost. He hesitated, then bowed deeply, a gesture of profound respect in Confederacy culture. Thank you. Han returned the bow. Earth was lucky. We were isolated, forced to solve our own problems. It made us creative. And now, Tai asked, will Earth join the Confederacy? Not yet, Han replied. We have much to learn about the galaxy first, but we'll help where we can. In the months that followed, humanity's influence spread far beyond military matters. Earth sent engineers, scientists, artists, and thinkers throughout Confederacy space. Trade routes that had remained unchanged for centuries were redesigned using Earth economic models, reducing travel time by 40%. Governance structures that had grown rigid with tradition were reimagined with human concepts of representation and flexibility. Cultural exchanges brought Earth music, art, and literature to alien worlds, while humans eagerly absorbed the knowledge of species thousands of years older than themselves. 1 year after the peace treaty, Commander Ta, now Admiral Ta, head of the combined Confederacy-Terveri peacekeeping fleet, invited Major Han to the observation deck of Peace Station. The station orbited a star on the former border between empires, symbolizing the new era of cooperation. Together, they watched ships from dozens of species navigate the busy spacelanes below. Merchant vessels, science expeditions, and passenger liners moved peacefully where warships had once fought. "It's changed so quickly," Ta said. "In just 1 year, the galaxy feels renewed." Han nodded. "People wanted peace. They just needed a path to it. And now that you've given us peace, what challenges will humanity tackle next?" Tai asked, looking at her with curiosity. Han smiled, watching a small Earth vessel pass below, heading toward unexplored space. "The universe is vast," she said. "We'll find something interesting." As if in answer, Tai's communication device chimed. He answered and listened, his expression growing concerned. "What is it?" Han asked. "Reports from the outer systems," Tai replied. "Strange energy readings, unlike anything we've recorded before." He hesitated. "Some believe it might be visitors from beyond our galaxy." Han's eyes widened slightly, then she smiled again. "See, something interesting already." Beyond the observation window, the stars stretched to infinity, each one holding secrets waiting to be discovered. The war had ended, but humanity's journey into the galaxy had just begun. Retroclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.